Well, hello friends, guess what? It's Friday. God has kept us and blessed us another week. Now let's just go ahead on this last day of the week and let's gather our faith around us and let's go out of here and finish strong as we get ready to go into the weekend. Hey, welcome to today's edition of Take 5. Well, this week, you know what we're talking about. We're dealing with the subject, peculiar people at work. And we have learned some pretty valuable lessons. We have learned that the workplace is a soul-rich environment that God intends for you and I as we go into our secular jobs to win the lost by living godly lives in front of them. And then when that opens a door for us to be able to speak to them, to be able to testify to them of our faith in Jesus Christ. We can't just sit around and depend on it to happen in church, friend. Lost people don't go to church. And we're going to have to go where they are. That's why Jesus said, go into the highways and hedges and compel them to come. That's what we're going to have to do. And the workplace is a great place to do that. And we have a responsibility to be a witness, an ambassador for Jesus Christ, even where we work. So we have this responsibility to be spiritually peculiar in front of those that we mix with on a day-to-day basis. Now, you know, this idea of everyday Christians evangelizing and telling the good news of the gospel, it's kind of hard to swallow for some people. We struggle with that. We like the safety of our churches, and that's where we want to stay. But the fact is, that's not God's plan. God's plan from the very beginning is for us to gather in our churches, be strengthened, be empowered by the Word, be challenged and changed, and then allow Him to take us and sprinkle us and scatter us out all over the world so we can let our light shine for Him. So evangelism doesn't take place primarily in the church. It does, however, take place in the workplace, at home, and in any place that we interact with people socially. Right now, we're just kind of focusing on the workplace because that's where the majority of people are. They are in the workplace. 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, you're there. Don't miss this great opportunity God has given you to let the life and the love and the glory of Jesus be seen in your actions and in your deeds. Now, I want to look to Ephesians today, just one verse, and we're just going to name one thing out of that verse, and we'll get into some more of that next week. But in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verse number 5, is where we begin to get some insight as to how God expects us to serve in the secular workplace, how God expects us to glorify Him at our jobs. We begin to get a picture of that. Paul says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Jesus Christ. Now, I realize that that's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow when you read that word slaves right there. And we immediately, because we like to, pass the buck, as it were, we immediately like to shift that off and say, well, he's not talking to us. Well, just a real quick word about slaves. You need to remember that it was universal in the ancient world. It constituted the majority of the workforce, as a matter of fact. During the time of service of these biblical slaves, they were treated as hired workers, not as this stereotypical idea we have about slaves. It wasn't that. As a matter of fact, a slave that loved his master and preferred to remain with him when his time was done could voluntarily indenture himself to that master the rest of his life. And all he had to do that was let the master pierce his ear with an awl and a hammer, drive a hole through there, and then he became his slave. As a matter of fact, they even used this slavery when they would stay with them all of their life. They used it to provide for their own families there. And even sometimes slaves had such a great relationship with their master that they were even included as an heir. Much was the case with Abraham and Eliezer. So we can't escape the fact that this is pointing to the working world. It's pointing to employees who serve earthly masters. We can't escape that. And Paul is writing this so that we will have a spirit-filled, godly relationship with the people we work with and for. Now that verse we read from Ephesians 6:5 said, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ." One portion in that I want to grasp out of there, and that is, slaves, obey your earthly masters. This means that we must obey our employer with the right perspective. Earthly master is what gives us the right perspective. When Paul says that, he is reminding us that our work and our submission to a job or a boss here in this life is temporary. Our current jobs and careers are temporary because you can only work at a certain place and do certain jobs for a limited amount of time, so it's temporary. More importantly, these jobs are temporary because you and I have been created for eternity. This makes it so important for us to live as peculiar as we can and take advantage of every opportunity to let people see Jesus in us, because we're only there for a temporary period of time. It's important to keep the right perspective in going to work and in serving an earthly master for a lot of reasons, but I just want to name two real quick. Number one, there's one guy you'll find, and he finds himself depressed and unsatisfied because he doesn't enjoy his career, and it's extremely difficult. But he's got to remember that his career, his job, it's earthly and it's temporary. Our final destination and workplace is heaven, my friend. And so we've got to live in proper perspective of this. If we hate our job and despise where we work and what we have to do to such a degree that we always have a bad attitude, we have the wrong perspective because we are not seeing it as temporary. Even if it's 30, 40, 50 years, friend, it's worth it to live a godly life so that you can have an effect on someone and bring them to Jesus Christ. The second type of person is the person that has become so consumed with their job that their job has become an idol to them. They focus on work to the exclusion of God and family, and that's their main goal. They live to work, and that's their only design for it, and they think of nothing else. And again, this is wrong because they are not focused on the fact that you're just here for a temporary time. So here's the thing. If I hate my job because it's so difficult to such a degree that I never want to be there, then friend, more than likely, I'm never going to live a peculiar life that'll lead somebody to Christ. On the other hand, if I love my job to such a degree that I make an idol out of it, again, I'm just going to work for pleasure. I'm going to work for possessions. And again, I'm not going to do what ultimately I am there to do. I am there to change somebody's life by living a godly life. Serve your earthly masters. That's what the Bible tells. We've got to have the right perspective. Well, hey friend, I got to get out of here. It's been good being with you this week. I look forward to being with you again on Monday's edition of Take 5. We're going to break this thing down some more. And man, I'm telling you, there's going to be some difficult stuff, but God's going to get us through it. And He is going to make us better employees so that we can display the life of Christ every place we work.